Hello everyone, welcome to our talk show. We have here with us Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, who is an acclaimed author, mentor, life coach and monk. He has been an invited speaker at several international conferences organized by UNESCO on interface of spirituality and science, and he has given invited lectures at colleges, universities and companies all over the world, from Australia to America. He is also an author of 18 books on the contemporary application of spiritual wisdom, and his articles regularly appear in several Indian newspapers, including the reputed The Speaking Tree in the Times of India. So we are very honored to have you here with us on our show, and we welcome you.
Happy to be here.
In this show, we would like to learn from you of how can one apply spiritual practices or spiritual lifestyle when somebody is young age, when he is studying or he is a student, and how can it practically help him. For example, if we take the situation of an average student in India, so he or she has so much stress in their life. For example, they take loans for education. For example, they have stress for exams. Then they have stress that okay, once they pass the exams, they get good marks, and whether will they get a good job. Okay, once they get a good job, they pay off the loans. The next step is who will marry them or what will happen. So there is so much uncertainty, and because they are very young and that phase of life is people want to experiment and do so many things. Naturally, there is a chance that they fall into kind of unhealthy associations and kind of having wrong thoughts in the minds and unnecessary anxiety sometimes. How can spirituality help one deal with these things, if it can? Or is spirituality just one more thing that adds into the list that gives more stress? So we would like to learn from you of how spirituality can be applied practically in this situation.
Yeah, very important question. Spirituality is meant to help us focus and direct our energies. So primarily we focus on our activities. We think that okay, in the morning I have to do this, afternoon I have to do this, evening I have to do this. We think of our day and our life in terms of the activities that we do. These activities no doubt define us, but what defines us much more is our thoughts. A student may be studying in a class or attending a class, trying to hear, but your thoughts are wandering everywhere else. Maybe the cricket match that is going on, or maybe a party that they are going to go in the evening, or maybe the party they had gone last night. The thoughts are anywhere else, then they cannot focus on what they are doing. And essentially, the primary contribution in contemporary terms of spirituality is that spirituality helps bring our thoughts and our actions in sync with each other. So when our thoughts and our actions are out of sync, that causes stress. Stress is not caused by how much work we have to do or by how much problems we are facing. Stress is caused primarily by our trying to solve a problem other than the problem facing us right now. Most people, surveys have shown that if they are in office, they are doing some work, they don't have that much anxiety. But when they come back home, or when they are in a subway, in a train or in a car, and they have nothing to do, that is the time when anxiety hits them the most. So we have problems and we work towards dealing with the problems. In that situation, there is no stress. But when I have a problem, but I am not doing anything to deal with the problem, except thinking about the problem. and not thinking in a focused way to plan and deal with it, thinking in a lethargic way, just imagining this may go wrong, that may go wrong, what will happen here, what will happen there. That is what causes stress. So the thoughts and actions going out of sync is the primary cause of stress. And if thoughts and actions come back in sync, then we may be in a stressful situation, but we can minimize the stress on us. So the spiritual practices such as meditation, they involve stopping physical action so that we can observe our thoughts and we can process and focus our thoughts. So there are different kinds of meditations. The most powerful is mantra meditation. But the important point in meditation is to observe and channel the energy of our thoughts. And to the extent we do that, to that extent, that organization of our thought energy, that carries over from our spiritual meditation, from our spiritual practices to the rest of our life. And more of our life, our thoughts and our actions come in sync. And when they are in sync, whatever problems we may be facing, we don't get overwhelmed by the problems, because we are doing something practical to deal with the problem. It is only when we think of a problem without doing anything about the problem, then we let the problem do a lot to us. So the more we think passively about a problem, the more the problem seems to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the more our feeling of disempowerment increases. We feel that I can't do anything about it. So this is with respect to the broad understanding of spirituality and how it can help us deal with issues of stress. Now coming to the other part about uncertainty of the future, that also is actually a manifestation of the thoughts and the actions being out of sync. The future is going to be shaped by the present. So the present is all that we have, and the present is all that we will ever have. Now certainly in the present we have to prepare for the future, but preparing for the future and worrying about the future, they are two separate things. The difference primarily is in who is in control of the thinking of the future. The Bhagavad-gita explains that inside us is our mind, and the mind is like a badly programmed software, and sometimes because of this bad programming, this malware that is there in the mind goes off and does things which are unhealthy for us. It's like some software, some virus comes in, some malware comes in, it harms our machine. So now the mind sometimes has this negative programming of worrying. So I often say worry is like the interest that we pay on loans we haven't yet taken. So the problems have not yet come, and they may not even come. Actually, if we think about the things that we worry about, more than 95% of the things we worry about never happen. So our worries are more imagined than actualized. Now this doesn't mean that we don't prepare for the future. Preparing for the future and worrying about the future, the difference is who is in control. Is it the mind that is in control, or am I in control? When the mind is in control, then basically the mind shows us a horror movie. And in that horror movie, we are not the spectators, we are the victims. And the mind says, this may go wrong, that may go wrong, that may go wrong, that may go wrong, and we feel, what should I do? So, without doing anything, sometimes we get overwhelmed. So when we are planning for the future, we are in control. That means we take our thought to the future. Okay, this can happen. This happens, then I can do this or do this or do this. Okay, this can happen. I can do this, do this, do this. If this happens, I can do this, do this, do this. So like that, when we plan for the future, we take our thoughts to the future and we are in control and we calmly analyze, and that makes us feel prepared for the future. Again, here also our spiritual practices help us to discipline our thought energy, and our thought energy channels primarily from the. So when we discipline our mind, then we can prepare for the uncertainty of the future by doing whatever is practical for us to prepare for it.
Wow, that's very enlightening, very helpful, throwing light on it. So the next question, what would like, especially for the young generation, what question would be there is, as you mentioned about focusing and having one's energy and one's mind in the present. So like nowadays we are living in an age of social media, so like it has become even more and more harder to kind of focus on doing one thing or one job at a time. And so what advice or what thoughts would you like to give to people who are kind of finding it hard to not let their minds just get distracted by the social media and focus on what, like, let's suppose a student is supposed to do his studies when he's at the university, no matter whatever stress of exams or job and anything he has, his duty is to study. But now the social media is right in his room, that he, like, you know, instead of doing what he's supposed to do, he is being kind of, his mind is going, you know. So what kind of, what can help one, or how spirituality can help one to kind of...
Firstly, spirituality is not a replacement for material practical arrangements. It is a complement. In the Bhagavad-gita, after hearing the Gita, Arjuna fights a war and he wins the war. Now he wins the war but not by the knowledge of the Bhagavad-gita alone. He wins the war by the knowledge of archery that he had learned throughout his life. The Bhagavad-gita gives him a purpose, a higher purpose for using the skills of archery. So there is the material and the spiritual. The spiritual is the director of the material. The spiritual is not the replacer of the material. The point I am making for this is, with this is that in today's world, it's a very technocentric world, and we need technology. So most of us need internet, need social media, and we cannot live without it. So if the problem is coming from the social media, then there has to be a practical solution applied at the level of the social media itself. So this means that we have to evaluate how best we can use the social media. There is no need to be a campaigner against social media. Like everything else, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. The chances of it distracting us is much more, no doubt. So in such situations, we may need something practical. We may just use some apps or use some filters, which we decide for some hours, I'll just cut myself off from the rest of the world. See, our willpower is not an infinite resource. Our willpower is a finite resource. What this means is that we have to invest our willpower wisely. So if I am going to study, I can use my willpower to absorb myself in study, or I can use my willpower to resist the temptation of going on some social media or some other site and reading something over there, watching something over there. Now, if my willpower gets dissipated in just resisting the temptation, then by the time I come to focus, my willpower is already exhausted. So our willpower is a finite resource, and that's why it's advisable to not dissipate the willpower on unnecessary temptations. So cut off access. In the Bhagavad-gita, when Krishna talks about overcoming our lower desires, the first thing he says is tasmatvam indriyanyadav niyamya bharatarshava. He says begin with the senses. So he says regulate the senses. Regulating the senses also means cutting off the access to the objects that can distract the senses. So at a practical level, if we can decide a time, this is the time when I am going to cut off social media. This is the time when I am going to focus on this, and we can have some programs which do it and which don't allow us to change the settings also. That's something, or we can have some friends who keep an eye on us and see what we are doing, and so we need practical help. We don't want to waste our willpower in this alone. Now, having said that, it is important, as I said, the spiritual is the director of the material, it is not the replacer. So when it is a director, that means if we have a overall spiritual understanding of life, then that understanding helps us to keep in focus what is important. If we are doing our spiritual practices regularly, if we are studying spiritual wisdom regularly, that reorients us. Say that an airplane, say, is going from Mumbai to New York, more than 90% of the time the airplane is off course because of the fluctuations of the motion of the air, atmospheric conditions, air pressure, all that. Now, what makes sure the airplane reaches the destination is that the pilot keeps reorienting. So it is not that we can expect just by our willpower or just by a resolution, I decide and next moment I will be in like a Zen-like state of meditation, no distraction, completely absorbed in my work. If we expect that, we set ourselves up for frustration. So the Bhagavad-gita says, the mind will get distracted, get it back. Yato yato nischalati manaschanchala mastiram tatastato niyamyaitat atmanyeyosham nayet. It says in 6.26 that wherever and whenever the mind wanders, bring it back and focus it. So rather than expecting, if a pilot expects that I will not go on the flight unless I can go on absolutely straight flight, pilot will never be able to go on track, go fly to the destination. At the same time, the pilot says, what can I do? The wind is taking me off course, I will go off course. No. As soon as you realize, oh, I have gone off course, bring yourself back on course. For a period of time, the pilot becomes more and more expert. And then the plane will still go off course, but it will go lesser and lesser off course. So like that, we cannot begin by expecting that just by my determination there will be no more distraction, or I will be able to reject all distraction. We will get distracted, but as soon as we become aware, we come back. We reorient ourselves. And by this reorientation, our capacity for resisting distraction and our capacity for increasing concentration, that will increase. And most important is not just saying no, more important is saying yes. So rather than saying I should not be doing this, I should not be doing this, I should not be doing that, saying no to anything creates a feeling of deprivation within us. And when no one wants to feel deprived. So if we focus instead on what I am doing and have some purposeful goals within that, okay, if I can just focus, this is a book, a 300-page book I have to study, in 1 hour I can read 20 pages. Then that means in just 15 hours, if I manage to study, I will have read the whole book. So today I will read 20 pages. So if we have a purpose, we can move forwards. And the basic point of spirituality is that it helps us to put first things first. First, we understand what are the first things in our life, and secondly, we get the awareness. When the second, third things become first, we push them back and put first things first.
Wow, that's also very helpful. Now we'd like to know your views on the education system itself. So, let's suppose by the time a student reaches his engineering or medicine or anything that he's doing, by the time he reaches that stage in school and everywhere, there is not much emphasis on kind of spiritual practices, or there is not any place that they are exposed to such things. So naturally they think that the goal of education is just to the goal of education is just to get a degree, go out and find a job and live a good life. So there is actually not much inclination. So we'd like to know some of your thoughts on what do you think the status of education system right now is, and what can be improved in it so that they help the student when they are in need, rather than making them feel that their only goal of education is just to just to get a job and move ahead in life. So it should be a wholesome education, not just a very streamlined education that just focuses on one aspect. So what are your thoughts on what we can do so that,
I think it was Rudyard Kipling who said that I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. So, I go to school, I learn something everywhere. That is not my real education. I have to learn. I have to see what helps me to learn, what helps me to grow, and I have to make efforts to learn that. Martin Luther King said that we live in an age of guided missiles and misguided men. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. That's what he said. So now why did this happen? We have guided missiles and misguided men. We have a lot of knowledge about the outer world, and through science and technology we are able to control the outer world. That's how we are guided missiles. But we have very little knowledge about the inner world and how to process our own emotions, how to channel our own thought energy. That we don't get any education at all. So we ourselves, we are not scientists, we are not humanity students, we are not engineers, we are not, these are roles which we have. We are essentially human beings, and whichever source of knowledge can enrich us, we take that and move on. So actually at the dawn of science, from the time of Galileo, basically Galileo observed that in the world around us, there are two kinds of properties of things. There are the measurable properties and there are the non-measurable. Deals with the measurable properties. So for example, length, breadth, height, weight, all these are measurable and science deals with them. Now, the non-measurable are, say, beauty, sweetness, melody. How do you measure this? If you are using Photoshop, say, to make a good image for something, maybe a poster, the computer can tell you how much color percentage is there in it, but the computer cannot tell you whether the image looks good or not. That we have to have somebody else, observer, conscious observer who judges. So what has happened unfortunately is the reductionistic education system that is there today, it has focused primarily on the measurable side of human beings and leave alone our spiritual side. Even our emotional side is neglected because emotions cannot be measured. No, we cannot have anger meter to say how angry I am. So this lack of attending to our non-measurable side, that has had measurably disastrous consequences. We have, throughout the history of the world, there have been people who have been inclined towards bad habits, towards self-defeating behavior. But the scale of it today is far greater than ever before. It's not just addictions, it's not just negative thought patterns, even suicide. So 1 million people commit suicide every year. 1 million is actually more than the number of people who are killed in wars and murders and terrorist attacks all combined together. More than the number of people who are killed by others than the people who are killing themselves. Last year I had come to Ohio at your place. So after my talk, there's one student who came and told me, just before the talk he was thinking about committing suicide. And he said, after I heard this talk, I understood it is not I who want to commit suicide, it is my mind which is saying this. Now I know how to close my mind. So again, it comes to the point that the education that we have, it is not that the education is at fault, it is the overall ethos of today's world which makes us believe that this education alone is enough. Science has a particular methodology and it will give us knowledge of a portion of reality. We need a broader understanding of life to know that, okay, this education is equipping me for this, but what about my inner life? And I need some education that equips me for that. and that is spiritual education. So we may good engineers, good doctors, good lawyers, good chartered accountants by our education, but we will become good human beings by our spiritual knowledge. I often put it that science can make things better. Spirituality can make people better. So if I have anger, if I have negativity, if I have pessimism, if I have self-doubt, all these, I cannot just free myself from these things. I cannot take a pill and just hope that it will go away. We need inner purification. So that is what spirituality offers us. Spirituality offers us time-tested methods for cleansing our inner world, for bringing order and direction in the inner world. And so the inner and the outer, when both are harmonized, that's when we will be not just productive, but we will be fulfilled individuals. Just by outer expertise, we may become productive, we may achieve a lot of things, but fulfillment will elude us. Fulfillment will elude us. We'll always feel dissatisfied, we'll always feel irritated. If we not learn to discipline our mind, even if we could achieve paradise, even if we could achieve prosperity equivalent to paradise, still the mind will say, yes, but. Yes, but. It will find some reason to keep us dissatisfied. So we need spiritual knowledge which will help us to improve our inner world. And whatever skills we learn from our academic education, the skills we need for surviving and prospering in the world, but what is the purpose of it all? And how do we use what we have for our good, for contributing to society? All that purpose we learn from spiritual knowledge.
Well, thank you for bringing a revolution in our show, and I think we'll end with that. And it was an enlightening experience to have you here, and I hope our viewers also had a good time and learned something really valuable. So thank you for your time, and we hope to have you again soon. Thank you.